After having their first child, a man named David and his wife, Pamela, set up a user profile on the household computer for their daughter, Margot. With the profile, Margot's parents are able to save her pictures and also set up social media accounts for her. As she grows older, they continue to help her update her accounts with different things, including videos of her piano lessons with her mom. Everything seems to be going well for the family until Pamela gets diagnosed with cancer. Even though David tries to help improve his wife's condition by looking for helpful tips online, her condition worsens, and Margot looks sad to see her mom in this situation. Pamela eventually dies and leaves her family devastated, with Margot also starting high school without her mother. Years later, while at a study group meeting, Margot gets a call from her dad, who complains that she hasn't taken out the trash yet. She tells David that she forgot about it, and he reminds her to throw it out when she returns home. As he then asks when she'll be back home, Margot says she'll be studying throughout the night, and that means she'll be home very late. Just as David sounds disappointed to hear this, because he already had plans to have dinner with her, Margot ends the call. She then leaves him a message saying that her friends are waiting for her. David asks how her exam went, and even though she says it didn't go well, she adds that she knows that her teacher won't let her fail. David says he's sure she did well, and just as he's about to tell her that Pamela would have been proud of her, he decides against it. Shortly after, David gets a call from his brother Peter, who wants to get one of Pamela's recipes for the meal he's preparing. Peter also asks about Margot, and David says she's not coming home early because she's at a study group for the entire night. When the call ends, David sends the recipe to his brother, after which he watches a video of Pamela making a meal with Margot. Later that night, Margot calls David several times, but he's already fast asleep. When he wakes up in the morning, he sees her missed calls and tries calling back, but she doesn't answer her phone. He then leaves her a voice message saying he was asleep when she called and that she should return his call. As he also looks around, he sees that she hasn't thrown out the trash, and he takes the picture and sends it to her as a reminder. Following this, David leaves for work, and while he's at a meeting, he keeps checking to see if Margot has responded to his texts. He also eventually discovers that from the picture he took in the morning, she had even left her laptop at home. After several hours of not receiving a response, David checks his mail for Margot's piano teacher's number, because that's where she's meant to be after classes. After getting the number, he calls the teacher, who then tells him that Margot has not been coming to her classes for the past 6 months. David is left shocked by this, especially because Margot kept taking money from him for the piano lessons. He then calls her school, but he said that she's not there. He immediately tells Peter about it and sounds unsure about what to do next. Peter tries to play down the fact that anything serious happened and that it's possible she only went somewhere with her friends and she'll eventually come back. He then asks if David has contacted any of Margot's friends, and after going through her social media accounts and finding out that they're all private, he tells Peter he doesn't know any of her friends. Peter suggests that Pamela might know, so David opens her user profile to see if his late wife knew any of Margot's friends. Luckily, he finds some contact details of Margot's classmates and then calls a boy named Isaac, who Pamela listed as Margot's best friend. However, Isaac's mom answers the phone and says that her son is not there. She also adds that he has gone on a camping trip with his friends, and she's sure that Margot was one of them. David is relieved to hear this, and he tells Isaac's mom to let her son call him in the morning when he returns. In the morning, when Isaac calls, he tells David that even though Margot was invited, she never showed up for the camping trip. David immediately gets worried and calls 911 to explain the situation as he checks online for missing persons in his area. Shortly after, he gets a call from a detective named Vic, who tells him that she has been assigned to the case. She asks him for all the important details regarding Margot's disappearance, and he tells her everything she needs to know while he checks online to see what he can find on Vic. Following this, she tells David that she needs to know more about Margot and the people she talks to. She asks if he can help her, and as he remembers that Margot left her laptop at home, David tells Vic that he can get her what she wants. He then opens her laptop, and after managing to reset all her passwords, David gains access to Margot's social media accounts and texts. After checking her Facebook account, he finds her list of friends and calls everyone there to ask about his daughter's whereabouts. Unfortunately, no one seems to know a lot about Margot, and this makes David realize that she doesn't really have friends. Vic also visits him in the house, and she's impressed with David's efforts. Much later, while complaining to Peter about not finding anything on Margot's online accounts, David then decides to check if she has anything related to school saved on her laptop. After looking through a couple of files, he finds a document with the name of one of Margot's classmates named Abigail. David immediately calls her, and she confirms that she was the one who hosted the study group meeting. However, she says that Margot didn't spend the night, and she actually left very early. As David then asks her more questions about Margot, she says they weren't really friends, and this leaves him angry as he wonders why she invited his daughter to her house. Abigail says that she only knows that Margot spends a lot of time on Tumblr. Even though David doesn't know what it is at first, he eventually checks her account but doesn't find anything there. Meanwhile, Vic finds CCTV footage showing Margot's last location. Because the road leads out of town, David says it's odd that his daughter would try to leave town, and that it's almost like she's someone else. Just then, Vic says she wants to do more research, so she ends the call. While looking confused as to what to do next, David decides to check Margot's bank account. After checking, he finds out that she had been saving up the money for her piano lessons. He also discovers that she sent a lot of money to a user in an app called Venmo. However, when he checks for who it is, he finds out the account has been deactivated. Following this, David looks through Margot's Instagram and sees some comments from a guy named Derek. He finds a way to get Derek's number, but after reaching him, Derek also says he doesn't know where Margot is. Shortly after, Vic sends a mail to David containing a fake driver's license with Margot's face on it. She says that she found a fake ID dealer who said he made it for Margot. She also says that, according to security at Venmo, Margot was also the one who came to withdraw the money she sent from her bank account. David looks shocked to hear this, and as he asks Vic what it could mean, she says it's time to start thinking of the possibility that Margot ran away from home. David says it's impossible because she called him several times before she disappeared, but Vic insists that it's likely she ran away. As this does not convince him, David checks Margot's browser history and realizes that there's a streaming site called Ucast, which he hasn't checked yet. He tries to understand the site and even goes live, but only one user named Fish and Chips joins for a very short time. He then sees that Margot has some saved videos of herself, and as David watches them, he notices how she keeps interacting with this girl who claims to be a waitress with a mother suffering from cancer. Margot feels sorry for this person, and in one of her videos, she also shows herself at a lake, which she calls her favorite spot to do nothing. David also sees another video where the girl tells Margot that she has dropped out of school because her family is trying to sort out her mother's hospital bills. The user also complains about her father and how she wishes their relationship was like that of Margot and David. Margot then says she's yet to tell her dad that she has stopped going for piano lessons, and when the user asks why, she says he wouldn't get it. David immediately reports this to Vic, but when she returns with her report, she says that none of Margot's interactions on Ucast have anything to do with her disappearance. Vic also says that she has spoken to this girl, and she's truly a waitress who was still at work when Margot disappeared. David looks unhappy because everything points to the fact that he doesn't really know his daughter. Vic says it's not his fault, and to make him feel better, she tells him the story of how her son once collected money from their neighbors for a non-existent charity. David asks her what she did, and she says she defended and helped her son make the lie believable. This makes David laugh, and he thanks her for her efforts on the case. As the call ends, David decides to shut down Margot's laptop and go to bed, but as he sees the video of the lake she used to go to, he chooses to stay up. He checks for where the lake is, and after seeing that it's not too far from where she was last seen, David realizes that Margot was actually going there. He immediately leaves the house and calls Vic to tell her that he's on his way to the lake. As he gets there, he sees her keychain on the floor and shows it to Vic, who tells him to remain calm. After she arrives, the story is then reported on several local TV stations. A while later, Margot's car is pulled out of the lake, and she's not found inside. However, while giving an update to news reporters, Vic announces that they found a small amount of blood inside the car, and that the case could now be seen as an abduction. She also adds that some money was found inside Margot's car, and that she'll be leading the search to see if Margot can still be found in the area. She crosses some points out on the map and says that Margot is likely to be in the other areas. With this, the search begins, and many people join David and the cops to try to find Margot. After a few days without finding Margot, David goes through social media to see the trends about his daughter. As he looks through several comments, he sees one from Derek, who claims she's with him. Following this, David finds Derek and beats him up for trying to play around with his daughter's case. However, when he gets home, Vic says she can't have him on the case anymore. Even though he's not happy with this, Vic insists that he does nothing until he hears from her. As the call ends, he gets a mail from a live streaming funeral service offering him the chance to arrange Margot's funeral. However, David replies to them saying his daughter is not dead. As he then looks online for updates on the case, he comes across the pictures of Margot's car. After looking closer, he sees a strange jacket inside the car and realizes that his brother Peter has a shirt with the same logo. With this, David checks Margot's texts with Peter, and there he sees that they've been hiding something really serious from him. He also discovers that Margot sounded scared in the texts, and she was always going to see Peter secretly. David initially thinks about telling Vic, but he eventually goes to an electronics store to buy cameras. He then visits Peter and installs the cameras in several places around the house to get evidence. After a while, David confronts his brother about the texts, and even though Peter doesn't want to talk at first, he eventually tells his brother that he was only meeting up with Margot to give her drugs. David is disappointed and angry to hear this, but Peter says he was only helping her because she needed someone to confide in. Peter also says that Margot always told him that she wasn't happy that David stopped talking about Pamela after she died. He adds that Margot stopped taking piano lessons because it reminded her of Pamela. As David thinks about this, he gets a call from Vic, who tells him that the police have found the person who abducted Margot. He breaks down in tears as he hears this, because Vic also says that the abductor, Randy, already confirmed that he killed Margot before then killing himself. Vic also announces this on the news, and she says that she's confident that Margot was killed on her way out of town. Later on, she calls David and tells him not to blame himself for what happened to Margot. She also says he can call her if he needs anything. As the call ends, he checks his mail and finds an unread message from the live streaming funeral service. He opens it and sees that they're asking for Margot's pictures, which will be displayed for the upcoming service, which is scheduled for later that day. After uploading the pictures, he sees that the picture on the website is the same as the picture on Fish and Chip's profile. He immediately looks it up online and sees several pictures of the same person. He finds the person's real name and calls her, only to discover that the person is a model and that Vic never contacted her. Just then, David tries to call her to confirm what he has just been told, but it doesn't go through. He then calls the police department and introduces himself, saying he wants to speak to Vic. The lady who picks up the call says that Vic is not around and she's likely already at Margot's service. She also says it's good to see how well Vic has been working on the case, even though she volunteered to take it up. David is shocked to hear this, and as he checks for articles about Vic online, he sees a picture of her with some ex-convicts, one of whom turns out to be Randy. With this, David realizes that Vic is not who she says she is. He calls the sheriff's office to inform them, and after a while, Vic is arrested at Margot's service. After she's taken into custody, Vic confesses that she was only protecting her son, Robert, from being arrested. She says that Robert had a crush on Margot, but because he was shy, he didn't know how to approach her, so he created a profile named Fish and Chips. She also adds that everything Robert told Margot was a lie, and he was only role-playing until she sent him the money he claimed he needed for hospital bills. At this point, Robert decides to come clean to Margot, so he follows her to the lake. However, Margot doesn't take it well, and she gets into an argument with Robert over his fake profile. But things turn ugly fast, and he pushes her down a cliff. Immediately, Robert calls Vic for help, and to prevent her son from going to jail, she decides to help him clean his mess. She also confesses that she made the fake driver's licenses, stopped people from searching the actual crime scene, and forced Randy to lie about killing Margot, after which she murdered him. She then recollects the things that happened after she was arrested at Margot's funeral service. On her way to the police department, David asks Vic if she confirmed that Margot was dead before leaving her. She says that even if Margot survived the fall, she would have died after a few days due to lack of water. However, David doesn't believe this because there was a storm a few days ago, and Margot could still be alive. Vic leads them to where the accident happened, and after a while, Margot's body is retrieved. She's then taken to a hospital, and after a few days, Margot recovers and starts school again. As she starts to text David again, he sends her a picture of her first day back at school. He then tells her to keep checking if she has gotten into a music school she applied to. After refreshing the page a few times, her application to study piano remains pending, but David then tells her that he's proud of her and that Pamela would have been too. Just then, Margot changes her wallpaper to the picture her dad just sent, and after that, she shuts down the laptop.